You ever watch something that's so strange, so hypnotic, you can't look away, but deep down you're like, what is going on? Maybe it's a trend on social media. Or maybe you've recently seen the movie Sinners that just came out starring Michael B. Jordan, directed by Ryan Coogler. Amazing film, by the way. But there's this one scene in particular that had me mad confused. So here's the setup. Twin brothers, both played by Michael B. Jordan, they open up a juke joint in Mississippi. And the film is set in 1930s during Jim Crow, which is why they open their own space, of course, for their community. But evil shows up in the form of vampires led by this man named Remick. On opening night, the vampires try to get in to play music, but they're denied entry. And then a woman goes out to check on them, comes back a vampire, and slowly people inside start getting bitten one by one in such funny ways. And then eventually the humans stay inside the juke joint and all the vampires vanish into the woods. And then there's this one scene, probably the most surreal part of the movie in my opinion, where Remick and his crew, they start performing this eerie Irish jig. And the people who were bitten, they start dancing too. One of them being one of the twins, they're stomping, clapping, dancing to this song called The Rocky Road to Dublin. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I found that to be mad confusing to me because, like, we're in a historical drama about the Jim Crow South, dealing with serious issues like racism and community, and then suddenly, bam, vampires doing an Irish jig. My brain kind of just, like, short-circuited when I saw that. It felt like the movie suddenly switched genres on me without any warning. I kept asking myself, what was the point of that? Was the director trolling? I kept seeing clips of it, though, on TikTok and people joking about it, and how one of the characters, Cornbread, whose face was half eaten, and I kind of just laughed about it. Now you may be asking me, Numa, this is a podcast about Africa, and it's called They Lied About Africa. What are you even talking about? What does this film or vampire jig have to do with anything? Well, this scene, and probably many other scenes in this film, left a lot of us feeling confused. I don't know about y'all, but right after watching, I had to search up Sinners movie explained on YouTube because while it was beautiful and strange, I didn't fully get it in the moment. Well, that scene brought out a very specific feeling. The feeling of being in the middle of something that's clearly meaningful, but have no idea what's going on. That feeling right there, that quiet confusion, the pressure to pretend, the instinct to smile, to nod, to laugh along, just so nobody notices you don't understand. That's what it feels like to live without your language. To be surrounded by a culture that's supposed to be home, but where every word feels like a secret you were never told. You recognize the sounds, you feel the rhythm, but the meaning, it never made it to you. A lot of us rap where we're from loudly. We wear traditional clothes on special occasions. We recite every Asake lyric like scripture, start jollof wars on social media, and even throw fake African weddings on our college campuses. But then someone says something in our language or asks us to translate. Crickets, we freeze. Suddenly all that pride feels far away. Like you know where you're from, but you don't know how to be from there. Like you're performing for the culture, but not fully living in it. Yeah, we laugh it off and say, I can understand, but I can't speak. My parents never taught me, or I only know the insults. But deep down, there's a question we rarely say out loud. How did we get so far from something that was supposed to live in us? Because language isn't just how we speak, it's how we belong. And when it's missing, you don't just lose words, you lose a piece of your story, your spirit, your place. And that's where we're starting today. If you're new here, welcome or welcome back. This is They Lied About Africa. I'm your host, Numbe, and if nobody told you the real story, I will. So far on this podcast, we've been unpacking what it means to return to Africa. Not just to visit, of course, but to build. Our last episode zoomed in on Ghana and asked what real investment looks like. But before we go into strategy, economy, or opportunity, I want to pause and talk about something deeper. Because the truth is, you can't build somewhere you don't feel connected to. That's why I'm introducing a new series on the show called Diaspora and Belonging. And you're wondering, wait, didn't we just start a new series? Yes, we did. But here's the vision. Hear me out. They Lied About Africa isn't just a podcast, okay? It's a layered conversation. Every few episodes will rotate between a few core series that explain different sides of the African experience. So both on the continent and in the diaspora. Last episode was on country spotlights in order to break down history, current issues, and opportunities in specific African countries. Today's episode is on diaspora and belonging to explore identity, healing, language, and the messy in-between of being erased from home. Another one is what needs fixing, where we will face the hard truths and systemic barriers holding us back. Africa Build is also another one where we will highlight innovation, resilience, and the solutions Africans are creating for themselves. Think of it like rotating chapters in a bigger book, because reinvesting in Africa isn't just about knowing what to fix or where to invest, it's about knowing who you are and why that matters. Today, we're starting with one thing many of us lost first: language. Let's talk about what it means to grow up without your mother tongue and how reclaiming it might be the most powerful way to come home. You know what no one really talks about? The guilt that comes with not knowing your language, not speaking Somali, Chui, or Yoruba. It's not something we always say out loud, but it's there. Like when someone switches languages at the dinner table and you quietly zone out, or when you visit back home and feel foreign, or when you laugh off a joke about being too Western, but deep down, it stings. Here's the thing, you're not alone, okay? And more importantly, you are not the problem. A study in 2024 by Dotchevan and others titled Linguistic Racism, Coloniality, and Language Shame in Diaspora Youth explores how people from African and Asian diasporas experience what they call linguistic racism. That's when you're judged, shamed, or made to feel inferior because of how you speak or don't speak a particular language. It doesn't just come from colonial systems or institutions, by the way. It can come from inside our own communities, from relatives who say you sound too American, or classmates who laugh when you try to speak your parents' language and mispronounce it, or elders who dismiss you for not understanding. The internalized pressure to sound authentic, but only in the right way, it's a form of violence, a quiet one, but a lasting one. We start to think, maybe I'm not African. Maybe I don't deserve to claim this identity. But let's pause right there, because this idea that your language skills determine your cultural worth, that's colonizer logic, not yours. Here's what I mean. During colonization, European powers didn't just steal land, they launched a full attack on language. They banned local languages from schools. They replaced oral histories with Western textbooks. They taught that fluency in French, English, or Portuguese was a mark of intelligence and civilization. And the consequences didn't just disappear with independence. A 2024 article in Nordic Journal of Migration Research breaks this down beautifully. It shows how post-colonial states, like many in Africa, continue to center colonial languages, especially in education, media, and government, because of the colonial legacy that told us our languages were backwards, tribal, or less than. And what does that do to a generation born outside of the continent? It makes us internalize that same logic. We see fluency in our mother tongues as optional or even embarrassing, while fluency in English or French becomes the standard for success. So let me say it clearly. You didn't choose to lose your language. That choice was made for you by systems, borders, and survival. Your parents weren't trying to erase your culture. They were trying to protect you, to give you tools to survive in a world that punished accents, that rewarded assimilation. Maybe they thought English or French would open more doors. Maybe they didn't have the time or energy after long work shifts. Maybe no one taught them how to pass it down. And let's be honest, some parents of the diaspora internalized that colonial logic too, okay? Not because they wanted to erase our identity, but because they were taught, like their parents were, that European languages meant intelligence, respect, and opportunity. That speaking Wolof or Somali or Twi was fine at home, but not in public. And if you grew up believing that, passing on the mother tongue doesn't feel urgent. Passing on success does. So now we're sitting in that silence, expected to represent our culture, understand our roots, and carry our identity proudly, even when a huge piece of it was never handed to us. That's not failure. That's generational trauma wrapped in silence. But here's what I want you to remember. Not speaking your language doesn't make you less African. It doesn't make you less valid. It doesn't make you a fraud. Language is a part of identity, but it's not the whole story. You carry your culture in how you show love, how you navigate family, what you dream about, what you're fighting to reclaim. And that intention, that effort, that's powerful. So instead of asking, why don't I speak my language? Start asking, what can I still recover? What does reconnection look like for me? You're not starting from nothing. You're starting from resistance. You're starting from memory. You're starting from strength. So we talk about guilt. The quiet shame a lot of us carry, but here's the thing, that shame did not start with you. It was planted, designed, reinforced, and over time across generations. And if we're going to heal it, we have to understand how we got here. So like I previously mentioned before, colonization didn't just take land, it took language. Because during colonial rule, European powers actually banned African languages in schools and punished kids for speaking them. French, English, Portuguese, those became the official languages. Meanwhile, Wolof, Twi, Lingala, Zarma, labeled as tribal, backwards, unworthy of classrooms or leadership. And here's the irony. Most Africans are already multilingual. Many speak 2, 3, even 4 languages, switching between local dialects and colonial languages and regional tongues every day. Referencing back to the 2024 article in the Nordic Journal of Migration Research, this is broken down in a term called language hierarchy, where colonial languages were placed at the top and native African languages were pushed to the margins. This wasn't accidental, it was intentional. Because when you control language, you control memory, history, thought, and that mindset never fully left. Even after independence, many African countries kept colonial languages as the standard, especially in education and government. Why? Because they were already embedded in power. And so even on the continent, speaking your native language became associated with being less educated, less global, and less valuable. Also, migration changed everything. When our parents or grandparents moved to the West, they were entering a system that demanded assimilation. Speaking English, for example, wasn't a choice, it was survival. And for many, especially immigrant parents, the goal was clear. I want my kids to have a better life than I did. So they prioritized the dominant language. Some were afraid their kids would get bullied or left behind in school if they spoke the mother tongue at home. Others were also just exhausted, working two jobs, navigating racism, trying to hold it all together. Language transmission got lost in the pressure to survive. And what did we do? The kids? We adapted. We leaned into the language of our schools and our friends. And little by little, we lost the rhythm of our own names, our prayers, our proverbs. Absolutely. Learning dominant language isn't the issue. In fact, for most immigrant families, it's a necessity. Our parents didn't prioritize English or French because they didn't love their culture. They did it so we can survive in a system that wasn't built for us. But the real issue isn't learning English. The real issue is that we were expected to learn only English. That the systems we entered treated other languages as irrelevant, unteachable, unworthy. And that's the problem. Multilingualism should have been the goal, but instead we were handed a trade-off: safety in one language, silence in the other. And when that silence goes on long enough, it doesn't just erase words, it erases connection, memory, and identity. And finally, Western systems don't support heritage languages at all. The study previously mentioned by Dotchevin shows that linguistic racism isn't just about being mocked. It's about institutions depriving youth of resources to learn or maintain their home languages. Western schools almost never offer African languages. There's no Yoruba class at your public middle school, no Lingala Duolingo track, though they do offer Swahili and Zulu. And even when they offer languages, it's usually Spanish, French, Mandarin, languages seen as global, useful, or profitable, not ours. And sure, some might say, isn't it the parents' job to teach the language? And yes, language transmission often starts at home, but schools play a huge role in reinforcing what's seen as legitimate. When a system treats African languages as unworthy of classroom space, it sends a message, quote unquote, your language doesn't belong here. And that mindset trickles into our homes, our classrooms, our identities. In some cases, the system made it worse. Studies like Abu Rabia and Satinsky in 2010 show that language loss among immigrant youth isn't just common. It was often encouraged by teachers, programs, and school administrators who believe bilingualism would confuse us. Some still believe that. But what's wild is this. Newer research shows that bilingual kids actually perform better long term. Stronger memory, better focus, more cognitive flexibility. But most of us were never told that, especially if your language wasn't a commonly spoken one. So even if we wanted to learn, we weren't given the tools, and often we weren't given permission. I was actually placed in ESL, which is called English as a Second Language, for years in elementary school. And here's the thing, I was born in the US. I didn't have an accent. I spoke English fluently. But because my parents spoke another language at home, the school labeled me as someone who needed help. Now, don't get me wrong, the concept of ESL makes it sense. It's supposed to support students whose first language isn't English, helping them develop skills in listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And in many cases, that support is crucial. Being able to communicate with your peers in a learning environment is important. Kids need to be able to follow lessons, make friends, ask questions, and English often becomes that shared tool. But here's what it gets complicated. I wasn't struggling to communicate. I wasn't behind. And because I come from a home where another language was spoken, the assumption wasn't this child is multilingual. It was this child is lacking. That's the problem. Instead of celebrating the fact that I come from a multilingual home, the system treated it like it was a barrier. They didn't ask what languages does she know. They asked how fast can we make her speak like us. And here's the irony. Knowing multiple languages is a strength. There's a reason why international organizations like the UN require multilingualism. Because when people speak different languages, they bring different perspectives, different ways of seeing, speaking, and solving. The world doesn't benefit when we all speak the same. It benefits when we understand each other across differences. But that's not the message that I got. That's not the message most of us got. We were taught that our mother tongues were side notes, that English was the upgrade. And so even when we spoke 2, 3, sometimes 4 languages, we were seen as behind, not gifted, not global, just other. So yes, language support matters. But when the system only supports one language, when it tells us our fluency in Wolof or Somali or Zarma is irrelevant, that's not support, that's erasure. This isn't about being anti-English, by the way. It's about being pro-multilingual, about making space for all the parts of who we are. So let's be clear. Language loss did not happen because we didn't care. It happened because we were caught in systems designed to make us forget. They told our parents their languages were useless. They made us feel like speaking English perfectly was the only way to be smart, successful, or safe. And by the time we looked up, our languages were buried in our parents' voices and WhatsApp audio messages we couldn't fully understand, in songs that moved us but we couldn't translate. And yet we still feel the pull. We still want to know what our names really mean. We still crave the words that make us feel rooted. This isn't just nostalgia, by the way. It's the beginning of reconnection. And if we want to reinvest in Africa, not just with our wallets, but with our souls, we have to start here by reclaiming what was taken, by remembering that the silence between us was manufactured and we still have time to undo it. Let's slow down for a second. I know I was going on a little rant session, but we talked about guilt, right? We've talked about history, but now I want to ask something simple. What does language actually mean to us? Because the truth is, language is so much more than just words. For one, language is memory. It holds the things we can't always explain. The lullabies your mother hummed without lyrics. The way your grandfather said your name with a weight that made you feel important. The family jokes that only make sense in your language, where the humor isn't in translation, it's in the tone. When we lose the language, we lose those layers. We lose a whole archive of meaning, feeling, of history. One participant in the Dachshund study described not knowing their mother tongue as living with a broken link, like their heritage was locked behind a wall they could see but not reach. Also, language is love. In many African homes, love isn't always said directly. It's shown through food, through effort, through language. The way your uncle gives you a nickname that only makes sense to your people. The way your aunt slips in a blessing mid-conversation, the way your elders speak to you in your language, not to test you, but to pull you in closer. Even when you can't respond fluently, something about it grounds you, right? You don't always know the words, but you feel them, the rhythm, the warmth, that sense of belonging. Also, language is spirituality. Our languages carry the prayers our ancestors whispered. They hold the names that were chosen with intention, with story. They hold the meanings behind gestures, rituals, and moments that get lost when we can't interpret them fully. Language is how many of us speak to God, to our elders, and to ourselves. It's not just communication, it's connection to something deeper. When we're cut off from it, it's not just cultural disconnection, it's spiritual disconnection. Also, language is access to community. You ever been surrounded by your own people but still feel like you were on the outside looking in? Because the conversation moved too fast? Because you didn't want to mess up a word? Because you were scared of being called too American or too Western? That's the ache of language loss. It's subtle, but it sticks. And for a lot of us in the diaspora, it becomes the reason why we don't fully show up, not because we don't care, but because we don't want to be reminded of what we lost. So no, this episode isn't about achieving perfect fluency. I'm not expecting that from any of us. It's about finding our way back to something that's still waiting for us. It's about intention. It's about healing. Because even if you can't say the words yet, that doesn't mean they're not already living inside of you. The language lives in your body before it lives on your tongue. It's the way your mom sets your plate down. It's the way your dad pronounces your name. It's the way you light up when you hear your language in a song, even if you don't fully understand it. That means it's not gone. It's just waiting to be remembered. This is why language matters, because we're not trying to just feel proud of where we come from. We're trying to feel part of it again. And when it comes to reinvesting in Africa, that reconnection is where it all begins. Before the money, before the strategy, before the business plans, it starts here with the language, with memory, with belonging. Let's be real. This part is the hardest because even when we know what we lost, how do we get it back? When you don't speak your language, starting that journey can feel like standing at the bottom of a mountain, barefoot. The words sound foreign in your mouth. You hesitate to ask your parents, unsure if they'll be excited, confused, or silent. You scroll TikTok and think, is this really where I'm supposed to start? But here's what I'll tell you. You don't have to be fluent to be free. You just have to try. Reclaiming language isn't about sounding native. It's about remembering that you're not a guest in your culture. You belong here. In a 2020 study, Abu Rabia and Statinsky found that when immigrant youth reconnected with their heritage languages, their self-esteem improved. Now let's pause right there. Notice that they didn't say when they became fluent, they said reconnected. Even trying, learning a few words, asking for help, hearing your name spoken the way it was meant to sound starts to heal something inside of you. It's like finally hearing a song with the right bass. It just hits different. And that connection doesn't just shift how you see your language, it shifts how you see yourself. Because language isn't about talking, it's about rooting. It's like this: you're a plant that grew in foreign soil, you stretched, you adapted, you learned to love sunlight that didn't always feel warm, but your roots, they've been searching for the original soil, for the rhythm, the nutrients, the name that made you. Language is how we replant ourselves, how we grow again with intention. And that's just not poetry, that's resistance. Dachshund study described reclaiming a lost language as an act of linguistic resistance. Because let's be honest, the world didn't expect you to remember. Systems were built to make you forget. So every time you ask, how do I say this in my language? You're defying that system. Every TikTok that teaches hello in Igbo, every tweet breaking down Somali pronouns, that's not just content, that's cultural recovery. You're showing that you were never confused about who you were just denied access. So let's make it practical. Here's what reclaiming can actually look like. So one, start with greetings. They carry weight. Saying thank you or good morning in your language isn't small, it's sacred. Calling someone today, ask your mom, your uncle, your grandma. Don't just ask what the word means, ask what it feels like. Also, follow content creators teaching your language. You don't need a classroom, you just need curiosity. Or make a list in your notes app, 5 words a week. Watch it grow. Use your voice. Mess up, stumble, laugh, try again. That's a part of the process. And if the way you say it sounds different from your parents or people back home, that's okay. Languages evolve and your version still matters. This isn't about mastering grammar, it's about reclaiming ground. This is your protest. This is your homecoming. You don't owe fluency to anyone, but you do owe yourself the chance to remember. Your language lives in your body before it lives on your tongue. It's in the food you crave, the music that makes you dance without knowing the lyrics, the way you pronounce your name even when others say it wrong. It's still in you. It's just been waiting for an invitation. So give yourself one, even if it's one word, one sentence, one voice note. That's how it begins. Because here's the truth, if we want to reinvest in Africa, we have to remember we belong to her first. And how do you belong to a place you can't speak to? You don't need perfect language to show up, but the willingness to reclaim your voice, that's where future starts. Everyone's talking about investing in Africa, myself included, about buying land, launching startups, building legacy, and that's powerful. But here's the thing most people skip over. You can't build somewhere you don't feel like you belong. We love to talk about strategy, funding, innovation, but we forget that reinvestment isn't just about what you do. It's about who you are when you do it. And here's what I've learned, maybe the hard way. Belonging doesn't happen to you. It's not something you wait for. It's something you claim. Think about it like this. You walk into the gym for the first time. You don't feel like you fit in. So what do? You wait. You wait to feel confident, to feel like you belong. But that feeling, it never shows up, because belonging doesn't come before the action. It comes from the action. You keep showing up, you try, you get better, and eventually you realize you built it. You didn't wait to belong, you decided to. And it's exactly the same thing with culture, with identity, with language. If you're disconnected, if you feel unsure, hesitant, like you're not good enough, that's okay. But don't let that be the reason you stay on the outside looking in. Because here's the truth, if we want to reinvest in Africa, not just with money, but with meaning, then we have to rebuild our relationship with it. In that relationship, it starts with belonging. You can't build with care if you still feel like a guest. You can't co-create a future if you're unsure of your place in the present. Fluency isn't a requirement, by the way. Perfection isn't the goal, and no one else gets to validate your roots but you. Reclaim them, even if it's messy, even if it's slow, even if it's one word at a time. Because when you speak even just a little of the language that your people speak, you're not just reconnecting with the continent, you're reconnecting with the version of yourself that colonization, migration, and silence tried to erase. And that version of you deserves to be seen, deserves to speak, deserves to belong. So here's what I'll leave you with. If you ever felt like you don't have the right to go back, if you ever thought, I'm not African enough because you don't speak the language, if you ever sat in silence afraid your voice wouldn't sound quote unquote authentic, this is your reminder that you belong. That even one word reclaimed is a thread reconnected, that the effort is the entry point, that the moment you stop waiting to be fluent and start choosing to be present, you begin reinvesting in the most powerful way possible. You don't need to have the perfect accent. You don't need to know every proverb. But if you want to see Africa rise, you have to be willing to speak up for her. Even if it starts with just one sentence. Because when we reclaim our language, we don't just remember who we are, we remind Africa that we're coming home. All right, I know that this was a lot, but if this episode spoke to something you felt but didn't have the words for, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Start the conversation, reclaim one word, reconnect with one elder. That's where the shift begins. You'll find all the sources, by the way, I mentioned it in the description box in Linktree. Check them out if you want to go deeper, and if you're not already following us on socials, what are you doing? Make sure to follow at They Lied About Africa on Instagram and TikTok, and subscribe to the YouTube channel if you have as well to stay part of the movement. We're not just changing the story, we're taking it back. Until next week.